If you look at society, it's an appallingly non-egalitarian, unfair, unequal distribution of power and resources, finance, comfort, position, status. Appalling. Appalling in that some have so little and some can have so much and be quite content despite the fact that some have so little. That we can tolerate such an unkindness in order that we have more to ourselves. That's the fundamental cause of all the havoc in society. Simply selfishness. And we're all here because of it. There might be one or two exceptions, Jesus and Buddha and so on, but for 99.999%, we're cursed with this problem of self-interest. Selfishness that doesn't get upset about others not being as privileged as us. We're dominated by our own privilege and very unconcerned about other people's. It's as if our own goal of being privileged ruthlessly denies a consciousness to the suffering around us. There's the law of diminishing returns here. To a poor man, an extra unit of currency, money, pound, dollar, whatever it is worth a great deal. To the rich man, it's worth very little. It has to be 1 million or 1 billion to count. And so there's an obvious opportunity for tremendous gain if I value other people's happiness as much as my own. And if I don't value their happiness at all, then I keep what's my own, even though it's not at the margin of much value to me at all. Don't even know it's there. Whether I've got 20 billion or 100 billion, not much. Perhaps it was 78 billion after all. So what? Doesn't matter. Money has become valueless because I've got everything that the money will buy and an absolute surplus of money beyond. Why am I keeping it? Because I can't do anything better with the money that will bring me more happiness. So it just stays in the bank or the investments, property, whatever it is. My mind's on something else. Why my wife doesn't appreciate me, or why the kids aren't going the way I want them to go, or why my neighbours don't love me for being so selfish, or why they do hang around me, but it's not love, they're just after the cash. And I'm not giving them the cash because I don't care about their welfare. I'm keeping it. And the more I keep it, the more they come round me because I've got so much. And they wouldn't be round me but for the cash. They don't love me for myself. I find I'm terribly unloved. Could it be because I'm not the least bit interested in their welfare? Even though the money that I have is worth at the margin almost nothing to me. Yet I don't care about their welfare enough to make such a difference in their life. I hang on to it. And this lack of concern and love by me earns me an incredible isolation. And I don't want to buy their love anyway. I want them to love me for myself. But they find myself so unlovable because I don't care for them. I'm in a spot. Who or what will rescue me from this dilemma? So let me give you the obvious solution. Sell all you have, give to the poor, come, follow me. You will have treasure in heaven. In other words, you will be happy within. You will be in joy and in peace, and you will know love and care. You will entertain God in your heart, always. It's as simple as that. But of course, rich young ruler, he had much riches, he had much to lose, and he went away sorrowful because his possessions possessed him instead of the love of God and for all that God loves. Imprisoned in selfishness. And even Jesus couldn't, or didn't anyway, pull him out. The only thing that can pull him out is his sorrow, a despair, an utter loneliness that cries out for God's rescue, so that he can leave his burden, that he'd been hanging on to, his wealth. Of course he couldn't do it because he feared the contrast, you mean, to go down to average. Average is desperate poverty. The vast bulk of my society is, well, in absolute poverty compared to me. And I'm to embrace that, to be happy? It's not making them happy. Is it? They seem to be very anxious to have my position, not theirs. Doesn't seem to make sense that I should give up what they value and take up what they despair over. That doesn't seem very rational. Well, the difference is why we're in the poverty. If we're in the poverty because of selfishness, then we long to get out of it. But if we're in a poverty that we've embraced because it's meaningful to not lord it over those that are suffering, not make it worse, but to in some sense be with them to help them, although they can't be helped because it's the selfishness, the material desire for self that's imprisoning them in the poverty, just as much as it's imprisoning the rich man in his wealth. In short, it's what, Hinduism has made very clear. It's the sin of self. That's the root cause of all the despair on the planet, is the sin of self. When you extend yourself to embrace others, when you start to love others and care for them, when you empathize with their dilemma, their prison that they're in, then the self is enlarged to include others by degree. Now, of course, a jump from riches to poverty is a shattering, cataclysmic, major step to take, in uncertainty, not to be taken lightly. So you do it by degrees. You say, well, what can I do to be a blessing that causes me much happiness in doing, because I know it's a blessing and so important, and really doesn't cost me much at the margin. So you halve your wealth, or you take 10% off your wealth continuously, or 10% off your income. Or, well, you don't need much of your income at all. You can live on a mere fraction of it, so you can give away a great chunk of your income. And yes, well, you probably don't have to sell the house you're in, but you could sell one of the 5 that you don't need. In fact, you could get rid of 3 of the 5 you don't need. 2 properties would do. And after a while you think, well, I don't know, or whichever one I'm in, what I want's in the other one. I think I'd be better off with 1 property, really. And so you can come down and enjoy the trip, every step of it. And you can do it by degrees. And it's sort of reversible. One has so much wealth that it can easily accrue again. It gets harder the lower you go. When you get down to the poverty level, the wealth is 0 and it doesn't accrue. You can't accrue much from 0. The only wealth you have is yourself, and the time that God gives you, and the health that remains, and the life that you have. That's the sort of rock bottom wealth rather, that you have. And if it drops below that, it's called death, and, well, that solves it. It's not a problem, is it? You're not here. So you don't have to do it in major ways. You can do it by degree, and see what makes you happier. Now, because be realistic, you're going to be giving to people who are selfish. they're not necessarily truly grateful, they just wonder why you didn't give them more. And want more, and want you because they want more. But on the other hand, some people, take a ridiculous example, Al Capone, gangster, Chicago, wealth and power because of his corruption. But he had some families of his own culture, I believe, that he just cared for and provided for. And he was their guardian angel. He would rescue them in their need. And they loved him. They loved him because he did rescue them, and, for unknown reason in a sense to them, perhaps an ethnic identity, perhaps a sympathy because he'd come from similar beginnings himself. I don't know. But he was helping some, and those he helped loved him. Perhaps they've had experienced so much poverty that they valued so much the relief that he gave. And they knew it was just given because they couldn't give him anything back. And they're overcome with gratitude, thought well of him. Because he may have needed this, may have known in his heart that his corruption was causing incredible suffering all over the place and couldn't live with it. So he compensates, he balances. You get this with rich people, don't you? Rockefeller or Carnegie, is it Carnegie? Hang on a sec. Anyway, in a smaller way, Isaac Wolfson and all these wealthy people. At some point it can suddenly be a burden to them and they just want to use it to buy something they haven't got, which is appreciation, to be valued in their society as opposed to envied in their society. They've experienced being envied and, well, it's a bit dull now. It's not the pleasure it was. What about being admired and valued and looked up to and loved? So they spend, they compete with each other to outspend on charitable good works. Lovely, isn't it? Just lovely, astonishing. They've ruthlessly acquired the wealth, caused havoc. The amount of suffering on their way to the top that they've caused, you daren't think. But also, it is a strange thing about our market economy that they've also made possible whatever product or service was that they were selling, that they made money on. And each deal in the market economy is quite interesting. Assuming both sides enter into it freely, they're both made happier by the deal, or they don't make it, and either one can stop the deal. Even if I'm paying you a pittance, but you're desperate for work, you're made happier by having the job. And I'm happier because I've got a worker at probably minimum wage, or below. I'm happy and he's happy to have it. Now, collectively, we may be grinding the face of the poor by our economic system, but individually, every trade I make, every contract I sign, assuming it's signed freely, you sign it and I sign it because we both gain something by, or anticipate some gain, by doing so rather than not. So I may not feel I've got my wealth by immoral means, but I may nonetheless feel I'd like to be admired and loved, not just envied. And I don't need more of the envy. I could trade a lot of that and get the admiration and love. So I do. Is this enlightenment, or is this loving kindness? Is this good, or is it bad? It seems good to me. Seems good. So what privilege should do is give you the experience of realizing that privilege is not such a blessing after all. And therefore you can unload some of it to gain something else. Treasure in heaven. Clearing of some of the conscience that I'm loving me and they're in such desperate situation. I'd like to do something about that. You see, we want to be truly noble. We want to be saintly because we want to be what we at heart value. And we at heart value loving kindness, goodness, charitability, help, blessing, fellowship, oneness with each other. That's at heart what we value. It's eclipsed by our selfishness until we experience selfishness long enough and realize that's not what we want at all. And that's what living in this world's about. And that's why there's such an inequality, why there's such selfishness, and why there is charitability and enlightenment, and spiritual progress, if you like. It's a wonderful creation. Does that mean we should continue this society that has such inequality? Or should we simply overrule and reorganize it so that that's not so? Well, one is I think you'll find you can't overrule it. It has to come from the heart of the individuals themselves. They have to experience what this world has to offer, to value the kingdom of heaven for real. So I'm not crusading against the planet to change it. Instigating revolution in order that we have a perfect system, economic system and political system that's fair and loving and kind. I don't think that's the way to go. The problem is in the heart of each one of us. And we are here to realize that we be blessed with, instead of a narrow self, ultimately a much greater, wider self. Now you could say, but the bulk of the poor are not experiencing the surfeit of wealth to come to this enlightened stage. No, but they still have the access to selflessness or the greater self by empathy. They suffer and those around them suffer. So each helps each other to the extent that they want to. They could keep the lunch all to themselves, or they could share it. So yeah, but the cost is then very high to them. Every dollar counts. Yes, and they also appreciate and realise and know just how much it counts to the other person as well. In other words, the greater their self becomes, as opposed to their selfishness, the more they will approach some egalitarian spread between each other. You could say this will result in them all dropping below the poverty line, or if they do it individually and others don't do it, them dropping down to the lowest level, which is starvation, in some societies at least. Yeah, I don't have an answer to that at the minute. Let me stick with it. Hang on. I have one obvious point, which is because of your kindness, people also want to come to your rescue. So people are far more disposed to rescuing you. You know, the typical selfish, well-off person is looking for the honest poor, the poor you can help that appreciate your kindness and that don't waste the charity you offer them. You know, they're the deserving poor, as they used to be thought of in Victorian England. But they are helped. Do you see, you call in the resources of the whole of the world by your kindness. And when you really come across a saint who is a saint, they start to get wealthy patrons who just see it worthwhile as helping here.
Well, this recording was getting a bit long, so I've broken it here, and I do an up-to-date comment in the next recording. Thank you, Dad.